afternoon. We're going to be addressed by the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Stephen Corbishley, and the officer in charge of the Roads Policing Unit, Inspector Charlene Thompson, with regard not only to the two recent fatalities, but some of the less than desirable behavior we've been seeing on the nation's roads, on the island's roads, in the last few weeks or so, few months or so. Commissioner.
Thank you, Gary. Good afternoon, everyone. It's with sadness that the Bermuda Police Service confirms the passing of, firstly, Mr. Omar Wilson, who succumbed to injuries sustained in a two-vehicle collision at the junction of Townhill Road and Harrington Sound Road in Smiths, which was back on Thursday around 7:40 in the evening. Mr. Wilson was the fourth road traffic fatality for the year, and at the time was riding a motorcycle when he reportedly collided with a car, and obviously investigations continue. But tragically, we saw a further death of 45-year-old Damon Simmons, and Damon was involved in a single vehicle collision, again on a motorcycle shortly before midnight on Friday the 16th. And this was in the area of Windreach, which is on Spice Hill Road in Warwick. And sadly, Mr. Simmons made Bermuda's fifth road traffic fatality for 2020. We have family liaison officers with the loved ones of both gentlemen, and obviously working with them at this difficult time. And certainly as Commissioner, on behalf of the BPS, we extend our sincere condolences to the family of the two men and their loved ones, because clearly this is an extremely tragic time in all their lives to manage. The investigations continue, and obviously there are some obvious facts. So the fatalities occurred with both gentlemen on motorcycles, but it's too early to say any other factors. So obviously if you ask me questions, I'm probably just going to turn around and say investigations are continuing. But I want to, and I've got Inspector Charlene Thompson here today, who heads our Roads Policing Unit, just talk about what we're trying to do from the BPS. But there has been a notable rise in speed on the roads, particularly, and I do believe, connected to what's taken place over the period of COVID. And I recognise and indeed support an article in the Royal Gazette today from Dr. Francione, who refers to the same issue. And I think given the things like shelter in place and then ongoing, there's been a much reduced level of traffic on the road, which I think has given opportunity for some, particularly on motorbikes, to go at a lot faster speed. And I think those of you listening and watching this will obviously have your own experiences where bikes do seem to be travelling a lot quicker and driving in a lot more, I would suggest, maverick way. To address this issue, and I mean, we see other tragedies in Bermuda, but you're more likely to die on the road than you are in any other circumstance, and that's a statistical fact. And of course the BPS are an enforcement agency and will seek to address lots of issues which connect to serious injuries and indeed fatality, with view to preventing them, and that includes speed, but it also includes sobriety as well. And obviously we do checks, but firstly and foremostly, the key part is the community itself and the way in which we all conduct ourselves on the road, whether it be in a vehicle, on a motorcycle, or even on a pedal cycle. So we appeal for people to just take care. Getting somewhere 5 minutes late is better than not getting there at all. I've just had a meeting this afternoon with the Minister for National Security, Rene Ming, and we discussed this issue at length. Because whilst clearly we will focus on enforcement, and obviously I've touched on things like education, there's a lot of work that I feel we need to do around the environment in Bermuda, particularly opportunities around repeat locations where we have seen collisions, and certainly my keenness is to look at some of the design opportunities we've got to reduce some of the risks. So that might be around traffic calming measures or other matters as well. And one of the other things that I'm keen that we progress is the island has a fantastic CCTV infrastructure, which I think could and should benefit more in regards to traffic monitoring, particularly around speed enforcement. And whilst that will apply to everybody, I think again, one aspect of behaviour change may lead to one life saved, so it's something that we're committed to. Obviously it's a difficult time, not least for the families, but we have invested significantly around our roads policing capability, to which the BPS have always placed a high priority, and I'll introduce Inspector Thompson shortly. But this is not about the BPS catching people out. This is not about hiding in bushes and jumping out with a speed camera to catch any person. This is about us being visible in the community, visible on the roads to change drivers' behaviour. And as I say, we want to do it in partnership, and we're really focused on a number of community initiatives where we can give some support and indeed equipment and other opportunity that communities can actually play a part in this role that collectively we've got to address, which is road safety right the way across the island. So I'm happy to take some questions in a moment, but in the interim I'll just hand over to Inspector Charlene Thompson, who is the head of the Roads Policing Unit for the Bermuda Police Service.
Good afternoon. My comments today are not directed towards the fatalities of Mr. Wilson and Mr. Simmons. They are directed to the motoring public as a whole, and in support of comments made by Dr. Francione in the RG article today. Assistant Commissioner Weeks has also repeatedly addressed the motoring public about the increased notability of the speeds on our roads. The driving pattern behavior of the motoring public, in particular since COVID, as expressed by our Commissioner, and especially post-lockdown period, has been alarming. And whilst calls are being made for increased speed checks, sobriety checkpoints, etc., this involves a community approach. The Bermuda Police Service cannot address these issues on our own. We need the public, in particular those of you who have the privilege of being holders of Bermuda license. We do everything we are supposed to do in order to pass our TCD driver's test, to pass the exam, to obtain that privilege. If the police or TCD was able to revoke that privilege by simply observing some of your driving behaviors, some of you will be without a license today. And I'm not speaking about ticketing, just simply observing the way the driving instructor does on your assessment drive and can fail you for things such as speed, failing to come to a complete stop at a traffic sign or disobeying other traffic signs, pulling out from a minor road onto a major road before making sure it is safe to do so, overtaking on corners, overtaking causing other vehicles to alter their course of speed or travel to avoid a collision, overtaking, making a third line in either direction. And one issue that's been brought to my attention is overtaking of buses that are parked in laybys letting off passengers where there is pedestrian crossing in front of the buses. You cannot see if a passenger is getting off the bus in order to cross, and this is causing a real present danger. Yes, there are some issues, as the Commissioner spoke about, that we can work on in possibly better placement of where these crossings are, but I'm asking the motoring public to please take caution. Not using signals, the purpose of which is to inform other road users of your presence or what you intend to do. Signals are informative in that they may give notice of an intention to carry out a maneuver, i.e., your intent to turn into a junction. Note, they give a warning, not an instruction, and give no right whatsoever to carry out the intended action unless it is safe to do so. These are just a few that cannot only be found in law, but in the Traffic Code Handbook. All road users who have obtained a driver's license via TCD had to know and pass in order to receive such a privilege. Impaired driving. Whilst the BPS agree that high vis for roadside sobriety, RSS, which I'll refer to it from now on, and other road traffic offenses are key to deterring such bad driving behaviors, the onus also lies on you, the motoring public. We all must have one person, just one person in our lives, whether it be a family member, friend, colleague, who will be willing to be our designated driver if we asked them to. If we made a plan, or even if our going out was spontaneous, they will come and get us from anywhere at any time. They don't have to come out with you. Just be there when it is time to come home. Make a plan with that loved one, or consider another way to get home. If you choose not to do any of that, then also choose not to drink and drive, putting yourself and other road users at risk. We are having too many unnecessary funerals, grieving families, lives going too soon. It is time the culture shift changes from Bermudians love to drink to Bermudians want to stay safe on our roads. It is not the intent of the BPS, as stated by the Commissioner, to have officers hiding in bushes as days long ago for speed checks. And we gazette RSS dates. However, RSS is an additional tool and not the only way we detect impaired drivers. I am putting the motoring public on notice that we will be out there with our lasers for the speeders. We will be out there not only at night after you've gone home from happy hour to detect impaired drivers. We will be out there for the day drinkers, happy hour drinkers who like to get home by 9 p.m. before police set up RSS. We'll be out there at 11 p.m., midnight, 2 a.m. We will be out there. Police cannot be everywhere, and we cannot do this on our own. Time to take ownership, Bermuda, motoring public, and adhere to the rules of the road that afforded you the privilege to obtain a license. Now, Mr. Korbishley, our Commissioner, spoke about some possible initiatives that we have been working on, and one of the key initiatives is called a Neighborhood Speed Watch. And by the ending of this week, I will be putting out a date via the Media Relations Department on holding a meeting for members of the public who are interested in joining Speed Watch. This will assist us greatly. This will be a big tool in assisting us, particularly in tackling our speeders on the road. The police will provide the necessary training and assistance in obtaining the necessary equipment for this to be successful. It will be used as a way to detect where, as the Commissioner said, we have a high volume of speeders, where we possibly have a high volume of other traffic offenses taking place, and we'll be better able to then put together a targeted approach. Because also the other thing we have to realize in a day of technology, our RPU officers are out there, but when you're up against WhatsApp and other technology, we have to move relatively quickly, because we could be out there doing laser in one area, the public finds out about it within 5 minutes, and we keep moving. So we are out there. You will see us out there. Thank you.
Gents, happy to take questions from myself or Inspector Thompson.
So, yeah,
Jonathan.
Yes, I was curious, if there's a sort of top line item from your meeting this afternoon with the Minister, are you able to share that with us, or is it still at early stages?
No, I think some of it, Jonathan, a lot of the work has been done in the past in regards, so there are some locations in Bermuda that are repeat, for want of a better word, collision hotspots, and I'm quite happy supplying those to you, because it's based on data and repeat instance. And the discussion very much this afternoon was to shift away from the kind of reaction and enforcement, which is important, to actually, can we start doing some design work to change the way in which roads work. And I mean, I have a particular support towards traffic calming measures. So when we see stretches of road that you put essentially speed bumps on there to physically stop people being able to drive extended distances at speed. And obviously we need to facilitate emergency vehicles, but there's lots of other things as well in regards to the width of roads, the visibility, and as I say, this work has been done in the past, but it's right to bring it back to the table to see if there is actually investment that we need to do. And the discussion with the Minister was very much in that regard. The other thing as well is around technology, and I think speed monitoring is important, but what I'm keener is to address the behaviour of drivers. Some people will speed for a very short period, but there's some people who speed throughout their journeys. And I think by investing against our CCTV infrastructure, and we can start monitoring, which is not unique to other countries, things like average speed. So we start working out when somebody goes from one point in the island to another point, actually what's their consistent speed right the way across. And I'm not saying sadly, because we have to be accountability on the road. If we go to that kind of infrastructure, people are going to receive tickets and they are going to get fines. But I think, as echoed by Ms Thompson, this is everybody's responsibility. And road safety requires responsibility of each individual driver, whether it be in a car or on a bike.
So just one last question. What prompted that article was I got a lot of calls, I guess, from people who want us to go back to the bad old days where there were officers hiding in the bushes. Everyone hated it. Officers hated it. I mean, you've already said it, but maybe reiterate why.
Yeah, but I think there's an element of good practice in policing, so zero tolerance and stuff like that. But it's only contained within the time that you can invest those level of resources, and it doesn't really change behaviour. In fact, the only behaviour it changes is, as described by Ms Thompson, people communicate where the hotspots are and people avoid it. I think what we've got to do is, there's three parts, three E's, sometimes I refer it to as, which is education, environment and enforcement. Now, of course, we own the enforcement agenda. Education is what we're doing today, which is part of the messages we're sending to the community. But the environment is something that's really important, and we need to change the way in which perhaps some aspects of our roads are currently presented to maybe change some of the behaviour that manifests by certain individuals. Yeah, well.
And also to tie in with what the Commissioner has said, the idea is not to, we got you. It's to change the mindset and behavior. So if people know we're out there, they see us, and they're slowing down, that means we're saving a life. Other than someone not knowing where we are, we're hiding in the bushes, and they're still speeding. By being transparent and visible, it will change their driving behavior. Flashing of lights to warn people that the police are up ahead, thank you. Because that's what we want you to do, because if it causes people to slow down, then that potentially saves a life.
But I don't mind a bit of we gotcha work every so often, Jonathan,
Following on that,
because it does get a message across. So.
Can you tell us when the sobriety checkpoints are going to be?
Yeah, they're going to be re-gazetted soon. I mean, some credit to Inspector Thompson. She's taken over the Roads Policing Department, and obviously we have an amount of resources that we can manage, but certainly her focus around community, education, even recognising good behaviour as opposed to solely targeting bad has been both refreshing and very effective. And also our use of things like social media just to keep people informed. But it's a long programme of work, and the point that I made at the beginning, it's one that can't be carried solely by the BPS. It requires all the driving public of Bermuda and indeed a number of other partners that we need to work with.
Commissioner, you just mentioned average speed check.
Yeah.
Someone who's driven on the M6 in the UK
Yeah,
knows how frustrating it is, but it works. It brings people's speeds down. We're talking about presence and talking about wanting people to be educated, but right at this point in time, the people who need to listen are the ones who aren't listening anyway.
I agree with you, and I think it's an important thing just to highlight, because we're going into some really wide issues about road safety. Let me just say that my thoughts are with the family of those that have deceased, and we don't know the factors behind that. So let's not just connect the two, because we don't know why it's happened, the issues behind it. So I just want to say on behalf of the families, we're not casting any sort of comment towards them, but there's a greater issue about how we change behaviour. But I think average speed is a far better way of doing it. I think also technology is something that we should embrace, and as I say, we've got a really good CCTV infrastructure. It's something I'm keen, and we've had some discussions, and I think that and it's something that Even the government are very supportive of a digital community, that we embrace technology to manage some of the issues. So whether it be around the kind of supportive accessibility, but it should also be around addressing issues of risk. So driver behaviour falls very much in that regard. And that's not as an excuse to the BPS. And whilst I applaud Inspector Thompson's commitment, and yes, we will place ourselves at different times. We cannot be at every location. I think the public recognise that. So what we've got to do is come up with different ideas, and I think technology is one of them, for how we can better manage this.
And you just said that, quote, we have a fantastic CCTV infrastructure. What do you mean by that? Why is it fantastic? And how,
well, I think the coverage is very good, and certainly when we start seeing some of the criminal aspects retrospectively, we can identify a lot of things in real time. We can monitor things. But software technology exists. Everything from automatic number plate reading opportunities, which I think should be an ambition. I think speed enforcement is another one, and quite simply, software can be applied to any sort of camera infrastructure. It reads the data, it can automate the data. There are models that will even give tickets without any human involvement. So it's those kind of things that perhaps are right to discuss for Bermuda, and the strategic imperative is that at the beginning the risk of fatality in Bermuda is more likely on the road than through any other third-party act.
And the actual, just referring to the BPS crime statistics, which on the website are only up until 2017.
Yes, yeah.
Are you able to give us, provide us with those figures of the speed crimes? People, even other small, might be considered smaller crime, vehicle crimes, like.
Yeah, I accept there's issues around the statistics. I mean, statistics are very complicated, particularly when it's reported, recorded and so on, and there's work going on with our analyst team to publish that. I can't answer that question now because I wasn't aware of the question, and actually it's a big question, but I'll be more than happy supplying that information to you.
My final question would be for Inspector Sharman Thompson. You said we're on notice, we will be out there. Are we looking at police being reassigned, or more? How many more are we going to be seeing or not seeing?
Well, we are out there now, but you do have what is recognized is that because we're not readily seen all the time, and that's the point for saying we can't be everywhere all the time. We are out there. I know my personnel personally are out there, and those of frontline officers are out there as well. So we're just saying that if we're going to be stepping it up. So this week alone, last week, even prior to the fatalities taking place and road accidents, I had already adjusted the shift schedule of my team in order to present a more higher visibility during key traffic hours, i.e. first thing in the morning, to lend some additional support. So you are going to see us out there noticeably more. We are looking at key points where our own data allows me now, before we get some of the other data, to allow us to have a targeted approach. We observe on our own. When I drive home, a lot of these driving behaviors that I note, we don't necessarily see when I'm dressed in a uniform sitting behind a police car. I notice these when I'm driving home in my personal vehicle. So I'm able to speak about it. I'm able to speak about people pulling out from minor roads onto major roads, because I myself have had to take evasive action in my personal vehicle because I notice people now are just pulling out from side roads and not stopping and inching out and making sure it's safe to do so. I've seen people overtake buses with children on a crosswalk not knowing that they're crossing. I've seen the third line people, and we see it every morning. We see it in the afternoon. We see it during the day. It's a culture shift and a mindset change that we're after. I think the enforcement, no one can argue that we've got enforcement down. But if we keep giving tickets and you go to court and you pay a fine and you walk out, have we really affected your behavior? So that is what the BPS is now looking to do. Change the mindset and behavior of our motoring public to respect the rules of the road. Because simply issuing tickets has proven not to be sufficient way of targeting the problem that we're having.
Any other questions, members of the media?
Thank you, guys.